All right, everyone, welcome back for another deep dive. You ready to get into it today?
Let's do it.
Awesome. So today we're going to be taking a look at this YouTube video. It's called No Woman Wants a Man Who Does These Three Things.
Interesting title.
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
And this is from a French channel called Pas votre frère, which means not your brother.
Oh.
So we're going to be diving deep into these three things and seeing if his advice translates across cultures.
Yeah. I'm really curious to hear what he has to say.
Yeah, and maybe we'll uncover some surprising insights about dating and relationships too.
Always a good thing.
Okay, so let's jump right in. The first thing he warns against is being noisy or boastful.
Okay.
He emphasizes being calm, serene.
Good.
Calm and serene, like the opposite of what we often hear in like Western dating advice,
Yep.
right?
Be assertive, take charge.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly. What do you think is there something to be said for this more understated approach?
Well, I think it's definitely more nuanced than just being quiet. You know, it's not about being a wallflower, but about having that quiet confidence. Think about it. Someone who really listens, chooses their words carefully, doesn't need to dominate every conversation. That can be so attractive.
Yeah, I get that. It's like a sense of self-assuredness that doesn't need to be loud.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Speaks volumes without saying a word.
Yeah, and there's this part in the video where he compares a man's words to explosives.
Explosives.
Yeah, like when he does speak, each word should have impact.
I like that analogy. It really speaks to being intentional with your words.
Right, like making sure that everything you say has weight and meaning.
Exactly. It's about quality over quantity.
Okay, so moving on to the second no-no, and this one might raise some eyebrows.
Okay, I'm intrigued.
He's really big on a man having strong financial status and career drive.
So you're saying he thinks ambition is key?
Yes, very much so. It makes you wonder, is this just a materialistic viewpoint, or is there something deeper at play here?
Right, because on the surface, it might seem that way, but I think it taps into this need for security. Not just financial security, but also the security of knowing your partner is reliable, responsible.
Yeah, like you can count on them.
Exactly. And that they're actively building a future.
It's that feeling of like we're in this together, we're building something.
Right. And I think in today's world, especially where things feel so uncertain, that stability can be really appealing.
Totally. And what's fascinating is that he even says a man who already has money needs to still demonstrate ambition.
Oh, wow. So it's not even just about having the money, it's about the drive.
Exactly. The continuous growth, the sense of purpose.
Yeah, it's about striving for something meaningful.
Okay, I'm starting to see this whole financial thing in a different light now.
I think it's less about chasing a luxury lifestyle and more about finding a partner who's got their act together and is actively shaping their own destiny.
Right, someone who's ambitious and driven.
Exactly. And that can be incredibly attractive because it shows maturity, self-awareness, a commitment to growth,
Right.
which are all essential for a healthy relationship.
Okay, let's tackle the last of the big three don'ts neglecting appearance.
All right, let's hear it.
And oh boy, he does not hold back on the importance of hygiene. We're talking brushing your teeth, wearing deodorant, the whole 9 yards.
So he's all about the basics.
Oh yeah, it's almost comical how specific he gets.
But it does make you think, how much does physical appearance really matter in the grand scheme of things?
Right, because initial attraction does often hinge on visuals.
Yeah, we're wired that way.
Yeah.
But I think he's getting at something deeper than just superficial looks.
What do you mean?
It's about self-respect and
Okay.
putting effort into presenting your best self. It's like if someone takes the time to groom themselves, dress well, it signals that they value themselves.
Right, it's like they're saying, I care enough about myself to put in the effort.
Exactly. And that can be very attractive.
There's this hilarious part where he says, women never forget a man's smell.
Really?
Yeah, he went there.
Oh, yeah. He makes it a crucial part of that first encounter.
It's funny, but he's got a point though. Our sense of smell is so powerful. It's tied to memory and emotion.
Yeah, for sure. A good smell can definitely make a positive impression.
It's all about creating a holistic, positive experience. It's interesting how these seemingly small details can actually have a big impact.
Absolutely. And I think this is where we start to see a common thread emerging from all three of these don'ts.
Oh, interesting. Tell me more.
It's all about intentionality, self-awareness,
Yeah.
and a genuine desire to present your best self.
So whether it's through your words, your actions, or even your scent, it's about showing up as the best version of yourself.
Exactly. And that's a message that goes beyond just dating advice. It's about cultivating a mindset of self-improvement.
So even though this advice is coming from a specific cultural perspective, there are some universal truths we can glean from it.
Absolutely. It's fascinating how we can find these common threads across cultures.
Well, we've covered the 3 big don'ts, but our YouTuber doesn't stop there.
Oh, there's more.
He's got a few more nuggets of wisdom to share. You ready to dive into those?
Absolutely. Bring it on. I'm ready for more.
All right, let's do it.
Okay.
So he cautions against being too clingy, too dominant, and even suggests that dating is a bit of a game.
The game. Interesting. How does that fit in with everything else he said about being genuine and intentional?
Yeah, that's what I was thinking too. It's like he's threading a needle here.
Right.
On one hand, he's all about respect, self-awareness, presenting your best self.
Right.
But then he throws in these elements of mystery and playfulness.
So how do we reconcile those seemingly contradictory ideas?
It's a good question. I think it's about finding that balance between connection and independence.
Yeah. You don't want to suffocate someone with neediness,
Yeah.
but you also don't want to come across as detached.
Exactly. Like, finding that sweet spot where you're showing interest, but also giving the other person space to reciprocate.
It's like a dance.
It is. It
Yeah.
really is. And the game aspect, that can be tricky.
Right. It's a go either way.
It can be playful and exciting,
Right.
or it can feel manipulative.
Exactly. And that's where intention comes back into play.
Right. Like if you're genuinely trying to connect with someone, a little bit of playful mystery can be fun
Yeah, it keeps things interesting
and lets the relationship unfold organically.
instead of forcing it.
Exactly. So it's not about playing mind games or trying to outsmart anyone.
It's more about creating a sense of intrigue and letting things unfold naturally.
And I think this ties back to what he said about a man's words being like explosives.
How so?
It's about making your presence felt without being overwhelming.
Being subtle,
Yeah.
allowing space for the other person to be an active participant.
Yes, exactly. It's about that back and forth, that push and pull.
It's giving the other person space to lean in.
And this makes me think about all the ways we communicate, even without words.
Oh yeah, body language energy, the way we listen.
It all plays a role.
Absolutely. I think he's getting at the importance of mastering those subtle forms of communication.
Like creating a magnetic presence that draws people in rather than pushing them away.
Exactly.
Okay, so there's one last thing I have to bring up from this video.
Okay, what is it?
He has very strong opinions about men paying for transportation after a first date.
Oh, right. I remember that part.
He practically calls it a moral debt.
Wow, that's a bold statement.
Yeah, and it definitely sparked a lot of debate among our listeners.
I bet.
Some found it outdated and offensive, while others saw it as a gesture of respect.
Yeah, it's a really interesting point to unpack.
It is. It's important to acknowledge that this is a culturally specific viewpoint.
Totally. In some cultures, it's still the norm for men to pay on dates. In others, it's more common to split the bill.
Right, and then you have all these layers of gender roles and expectations which are constantly evolving.
It's a reminder that there's no one-size-fits-all answer when it comes to dating etiquette.
Exactly.
Wow.
What's considered polite in one context could be totally inappropriate in another.
And I think what matters most is having open communication with your date.
So you can find an approach that feels comfortable and equitable for both people.
Exactly. It's about being respectful and having a conversation about what feels right.
Instead of getting caught up in rigid rules or expectations.
Right. It's about being mindful and adapting to the situation.
I think that's a great takeaway from this whole deep dive.
You too.
It's not about blindly following rules. It's about understanding the principles behind the advice and applying them in a way that feels authentic to you.
Absolutely. And that's what makes these conversations so valuable. We get to explore different perspectives and challenge our own beliefs.
It's all about growth and self-discovery.
Exactly. And I think this French YouTuber, even though his advice might seem unconventional, has given us a lot to think about.
For sure. He's got us questioning our assumptions about dating and relationships.
And maybe even inspired us to try some new things.
I think so too. So as we wrap up this part of the deep dive, I want you to consider how this advice resonates with your own experiences and values.
Yeah. What parts of it resonate with you? What parts don't?
And most importantly, trust your instincts.
Always trust your gut.
All right, everyone. Thanks for joining us on this fascinating deep dive into the world of relationship advice. We'll be back soon with part 2 of this episode, where we'll explore some additional tips from our French YouTuber and discuss how they relate to healthy relationships. So stay tuned.
Can't wait.
We'll see you soon.
See ya. Welcome back. So we left off talking about all these nuances of communication and dating.
Yeah, like how even the little things can have a big impact.
And I'm really intrigued to see what other advice this French YouTuber has for us.
Me too. Especially how it all connects back to this idea of intentionality and presenting your best self.
Right, because he seems to really emphasize that.
Okay, so he throws in a few extra tips that I think are worth exploring.
Okay, let's hear them.
He cautions against being too clingy, too dominant.
Okay.
And he even suggests that dating is kind of a game. A game.
That's interesting. Especially in the context of being genuine and intentional. How does that work?
Right, like it seems a bit contradictory.
Yeah, how do you reconcile those two ideas?
It's tricky. I think it comes down to finding a balance between connection and independence.
Right, because you don't want to smother someone.
Exactly. But you also don't want to seem totally detached,
It's about finding that sweet spot.
where you're showing interest but also giving space for the other person to reciprocate.
It's like a dance, isn't it?
Perfect analogy. And the game aspect, I think that can be tricky too.
Definitely, because it can go either way.
It can be playful and exciting, or it can feel manipulative and inauthentic.
And that's where intention comes into play again.
Right. Like if you're approaching dating with a genuine desire to connect, then a little mystery can be fun.
Yeah, it keeps things interesting.
Yeah,
Allows the relationship to unfold organically.
exactly. Rather than trying to force it or control it.
So it's not about playing mind games.
No, it's more about creating a sense of intrigue and letting things progress naturally.
I like that. And it actually ties back to what he said about a man's words being like explosives.
How so?
It's about making your presence felt without overwhelming the other person.
Being subtle, allowing space for the other person to participate.
Exactly. It's a give and take.
This makes me think about all the ways we communicate, even without words.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Body language,
All right.
our energy, the way we listen, it all plays a role in creating attraction and building connection.
Absolutely. And I think he's getting at the importance of mastering those subtle forms of communication
Creating a magnetic presence that draws people in.
instead of pushing them away.
Exactly. Okay, there's one more piece of advice I have to bring up.
Okay. What is it?
He has very strong opinions about men paying for transportation after a first date.
Oh, right.
Yeah,
He practically calls it a moral debt.
a moral debt,
Right.
which obviously sparked a lot of conversation.
I can imagine. That's a pretty strong statement.
Yeah, some listeners found it outdated and offensive. Others saw it as a gesture of respect.
It's a really interesting point to consider.
It is. And it's important to acknowledge that this is a culturally specific viewpoint.
Definitely.
In some cultures, it's still the norm for men to pay on dates. In others, it's more common to split the bill.
Right. And then you have all the complexities of gender roles and expectations, which are constantly evolving.
Exactly.
So there's no easy answer.
No. And I think what matters most is having open communication with your date.
So you can find an approach that feels comfortable and equitable for both people.
Instead of getting caught up in rigid rules or expectations.
Right. It's about being mindful and respectful and having a conversation.
Which brings us back to that theme of intentionality.
Yes.
It all comes back to intention.
It's not about blindly following the rules. It's about understanding the principles behind the advice and applying them in a way that feels authentic to you.
And that's what I love about these deep dives. It's all about exploring different perspectives and challenging our own beliefs.
Exactly.
And this French YouTuber, even though his advice might seem unconventional at times, he's given us a lot to think about.
Definitely. He's challenged our assumptions about dating and relationships.
And maybe even inspired us to try some new things.
So as we move into the last part of this deep dive, keep thinking about how all of this advice resonates with your own experiences and values.
What feels right for you, what doesn't.
And trust your instincts.
Because ultimately, you are the expert of your own life.
All right, let's take a quick break and we'll be right back to wrap up this deep dive. Okay, sounds good. All right, so we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive. We've talked about everything from being calm, serene, to the importance of hygiene, to navigating those tricky dating dynamics.
Yeah, and it's all been through the lens of this French YouTuber and his perspective on what women want in a man.
And I think one of the biggest takeaways for me is that there's no one-size-fits-all answer when it comes to relationships.
Absolutely. What works for one person might not work for another, and that's totally okay.
Exactly. And I think that's where the idea of intentionality comes in. It's about being mindful of your own values, your own needs, and what you're looking for in a partner.
Right. And not just trying to blindly follow some set of rules or expectations.
Because those rules and expectations can vary so much from culture to culture, from person to person.
So as you're navigating the world of dating and relationships, I think the most important thing is to trust your instincts.
Yeah, listen to your gut feeling.
If something feels off, it probably is. And if something feels right, don't be afraid to go for it.
Exactly. And remember, relationships are a two-way street. It's not just about finding someone who embodies all these qualities. It's also about being the kind of partner you want to attract.
That's such a good point. It's like that saying, be the change you want to see in the world, but in this case, it's be the partner you want to attract.
Exactly. It's about self-reflection and asking yourself, am I embodying the qualities I admire in others?
And if not, how can I work towards becoming that person?
Right. It's about recognizing that relationships can be an amazing opportunity for growth and self-discovery.
They challenge us to become more self-aware, more communicative, more intentional in our actions.
And sometimes they even challenge us to step outside of our comfort zones and try new things.
Yeah, like maybe adopting a more calm, serene approach, or adding a little playful mystery to our interactions.
Right. It's all about finding that balance between being authentically you and being open to growth and new experiences.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with this final thought. Relationships are a journey, not a destination.
Oh, I like that.
Embrace the ups and downs, the challenges and the triumphs.
Because it's all part of the process.
And most importantly, never stop learning and growing, both individually and together.
Beautifully said.
Thanks for joining us on this fascinating deep dive into the world of relationship advice.
It's been a pleasure.
We'll see you next time for another thought-provoking exploration of the ideas that shape our world.
Until then, keep diving deep.